I awakened the most useless F-rank ability in history. Refresh. It lets me target non-living objects within a 1-meter radius and reset them to their original state. But in practice, I'd refresh a book and it was still just a book. Refresh a towel and it stayed a towel. So 3 months into the zombie apocalypse, my girlfriend grabbed the last half-pack of crackers, got in another guy's car without looking back, and tossed an empty noodle cup at my feet before leaving, like I was some stray dog. Don't blame me, babe. Your ability is just too useless. If I stay with you, I'll starve to death. In despair, I stared at that empty cup, and a crazy idea suddenly hit me. Refresh. The rich smell of braised beef suddenly exploded in the air, and beneath the torn packaging sat neatly stacked noodles and 3 seasoning packets. I froze. So my ability wasn't useless after all. We'd all just misunderstood it. This so-called reset to initial state didn't mean going back to how it was a second ago, but to its factory fresh condition. An empty noodle cup. Its initial state was a brand new, unopened cup of noodles. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest, not from fear, but from pure exhilaration. I looked around this ransacked convenience store. The shelves were littered with torn open snack bags, empty drink bottles, trash to everyone else. But to me now, this was a bottomless treasure trove. I didn't rush to boil water for the noodles. In the apocalypse, the smell of food could draw unwanted attention. I carefully climbed to the storage room on the 2nd floor and barricaded the door with heavy shelves. Only after making sure it was safe did I start my experiment. I put the empty cup on the floor and thought refresh in my head. The cup in front of me rippled almost imperceptibly, and instantly a brand new cup of noodles appeared. Again, I kept repeating it, barely containing my excitement. 10 minutes later, I'd piled up a small mountain of 60 instant noodle cups. My ability had a 10-second cooldown, meaning I could have unlimited noodles. Then I looked at an empty water bottle nearby. Refresh. Instantly, a 500 milliliters bottle of purified water appeared. I looked at the first aid kit on the ground, now just an empty shell. Refresh. A brand new first aid kit appeared in my hands. My breathing grew rapid. Food, water, medicine, the most precious resources in the apocalypse, were now inexhaustible for me. Lu Ruyan, didn't you say my ability was worthless? Just wait. One day you'll come begging on your knees, begging me for scraps. For the next 3 days, I locked myself in the warehouse. The mountain of empty packaging in the warehouse became my raw materials. Chips, crackers, chocolate, everything edible. I refreshed them into several large crates. Drinks and bottled water filled half the corner. Most importantly, I found an empty gas canister, paired with a portable camping stove from the store. I could finally have a hot meal. After closing all the warehouse windows, I boiled a pot of water, tore open 3 seasoning packets, and carefully placed the noodle cake inside. When that long-lost aroma filled my nose, I couldn't hold back my tears. I cried as I wolfed it down. Since the apocalypse began, this was the fullest, safest meal I'd eaten. After eating my fill, my mind began to clear. Staying hidden here wasn't a solution. This convenience store would be overrun by zombies eventually, or discovered by other survivors. I had to find a safer base. Besides, I needed weapons. Food and water alone, in this wasteland, would only make me a lamb to the slaughter. I packed all the supplies into 2 massive hiking backpacks. Then I opened the door a crack and checked the world outside. A few zombies wandered aimlessly down the street. I took a deep breath. I gripped the fruit knife I'd refreshed, now sharp as new. Time to go. Getting out was tense but uneventful. I used the maze of back alleys to avoid most of the zombies. When I ran into stragglers, I'd throw a refreshed full can of Coke as hard as I could. While it staggered, I'd finish it off with the knife. My target was Blue Bay Residences out west. It was a famous upscale neighborhood with serious security. The walls were high and thick. They'd hold for a while, at least early on. More importantly, my parents' house was there. I was at school when the apocalypse hit and lost contact with my parents. Finding them was my only goal now. But the journey to Blue Bay was tougher than I expected. The city was completely paralyzed. Abandoned vehicles clogged every main road. I saw too many tragedies along the way. Violent fights broke out over supplies. That is when I truly realized Liu Yanyan's betrayal was perhaps just in this cruel world the most insignificant part. Here, humanity had already collapsed. By dusk on the third day, I finally reached the outskirts of Blue Bay. The tall iron gates were shut tight. I could see guards on the walls. As expected, it had become a survivor stronghold. I hid nearby and watched for a long time. To enter the compound, I'd have to pass their inspection. So, I packed my bag, stashed most of my supplies in a hidden sewer, keeping only 2 bottles of water and a pack of crackers, pretending to be an ordinary refugee, and walked toward the gate. "Stop, who goes there?" A sharp voice rang out from the wall. I raised my hands and looked up, my face dirty with dust and grime. "I'm a resident here. My name is Lin Fan. I live in Building 17. Building 17, Lin Fan, verify." The man above went quiet for a moment, seemingly checking over the radio. A moment later, the gate cracked open. A man holding a steel pipe, looking wary, stepped out. "ID," he said, curtly. I pulled the ID I prepared from my pocket and handed it over. He checked it, then looked me up and down. "Just you? Where are your supplies?" I lowered my head at his words, my voice carrying just the right tremor of fear. "I was robbed on the way. This is all I have left." The man frowned. He seemed skeptical, but faced with my frail frame and pitiful appearance, he finally let his guard down. "Come in, remember the rules. All newcomers must hand over half their supplies for redistribution." My heart sank at his words. Luckily, I'd come prepared, so I nodded obediently, handing over a bottle of water and half a pack of crackers. The man took them. A flicker of disdain crossed his eyes, but he still waved his hand and let me pass. Once inside the complex, the scene let me breathe easier. The atmosphere remained tense, but at least there was order. People were patrolling, others were reinforcing the defenses. There were also women and children gathered in the community center. It was like an island in the apocalypse, temporarily cut off from the carnage outside. An older woman at registration told me that a man called Brother Bao now ran things. He used to be the property manager here. After the apocalypse hit, he awakened Earth element powers and organized a guard to protect everyone. All residents received daily rations based on contribution points. To earn more, you had to join the patrol or logistics teams. I claimed poor health and didn't join any team for now. My priority was finding my parents. With an anxious heart, I ran to my doorstep, only to find the security door forced open and the inside ransacked. Seeing this, my heart plummeted. I rushed inside, frantically calling for Mom and Dad, but only deathly silence answered. A thin layer of dust covered the living room table, showing they'd been gone for days. There were signs of struggle on the floor, but no blood. A small mercy, perhaps. I collapsed onto the floor. Unprecedented confusion and fear gripped me. I had no idea where to search. As I sat there, dazed, footsteps approached outside. A leering voice rang out. Well, looks like we missed one." I jerked my head up to find 2 men blocking the doorway. The one in front had a shaved head, eyeing me with unmistakable malice. I recognized him. He was Scorpion, a small-time lieutenant under Brother Bao. Scorpion licked his lips, his gaze raking over me like I was fresh meat on the chopping block. "Your household head owed Brother Bao quite a few contribution points the other day. They got kicked out. This place is ours now." My eyes narrowed. "What did you do to my parents?" "Just kicked them out. That is what happens to the useless in the apocalypse. But you seem capable enough. If you're willing to stick around and run errands for us, handle a few things, we might consider letting you scrape by here." I'd been so naive, thinking this place was a safe haven. Turns out, it is the same law of the jungle. As they drew closer, my hand slipped quietly toward the side pocket of my pack. Inside lay a fruit knife I'd sharpened to a gleaming edge. But just as I braced to fight for my life, a cold female voice cut through from the doorway. "Stop!" Scorpion and his men froze mid-step. When they saw who it was, their grins stiffened instantly, replaced by fawning deference. The woman in the doorway wore black combat gear. She carried a Tang Dao in her hand, its blade still streaked with dark red stains. Several equally formidable team members followed behind her. I knew her. This was Shen Ling, captain of Blade, the strongest combat squad in the guard. Rumored to have awakened a rare metal-type ability, her strength was unfathomable. Brother Leopard's most trusted weapon. Chen ignored Scorpion, her eyes settling on me as she asked flatly, "What is going on?" I seized the lifeline and spoke urgently. "They're trying to bully me. Scorpion's face shifted as he rushed to explain. Captain Shen, don't listen to his nonsense. His parents owed contribution points. We're just here to collect the property. Does collecting property require two of you and blocking the door? Her voice wasn't loud, yet carried absolute authority. Get out now. Scorpion fled as if granted amnesty, dragging his men out in a panic. Once the danger passed, my tensed body went slack, and I nearly collapsed. Shenling studied me, her brow furrowing slightly. Stay away from that crowd from now on. She clearly didn't want to get involved further. She turned to leave. I quickly called out to stop her. Captain Shen, do you know where they took my parents? They're Lin Zhangguo and Wang Shumei. Shenlin thought for a moment, then seemed to remember. Brother Bao sent everyone without supernatural abilities, along with the elderly and disabled who couldn't do heavy labor, to the abandoned factory outside the North Gate, calling it letting nature take its course. My heart sank. An abandoned factory like that. No food, no protection. How is that any different from waiting to die? Once Shenlin left, I immediately shut the door. I had to get to the North Gate factory. I had to find my parents. But first, I needed strength. I grabbed a chocolate bar from my backpack, wolfed it down for a quick energy boost. Then I spotted the steel pipe Scorpion had left behind. It was rusted and slightly bent. I placed my hand on it and refreshed it. Then, a brand new, gleaming steel pipe appeared in my hand. But that wasn't enough. I ran to the kitchen and found my dad's old, outdoor survival kit. Inside was a multi-purpose military shovel, a survival axe, and a dagger. They had all grown dull from disuse. I refreshed all three weapons, instantly restoring them to razor-sharp condition. When night fell, I slipped out during the patrol's shift change and quietly headed to the North Gate. It was far more desolate than the main entrance. Only 2 guards stood watch, yawning. I didn't alert them. Instead, I found a blind spot in the surveillance. Using the brand new rope I had refreshed, I easily scaled the 3-meter wall. Beyond the wall lay a wasteland. In the distance, I could make out a factory, like a silent steel beast. The air reeked of decay. Occasional zombie growls echoed in the darkness. I gripped the pipe and crouched low, quickly making my way toward the factory. But the closer I got to the factory, the more zombies there were. I hid behind a crumbling wall. At least a dozen zombies were gathered at the factory entrance, drawn by some noise, frantically pounding on the factory's sealed iron gate, while faint cries and screams came from inside. My parents were in there. I was frantic, but my mind warned me not to force my way in. I surveyed my surroundings and spotted a row of high windows on the factory side, roughly 4 meters from the ground. Maybe I could enter from there. Having made up my mind, I sprang into action. I grabbed a rock and hurled it with all my strength at an abandoned car in the distance. It struck the windshield, producing a sharp crack. Sure enough, the zombies at the entrance were drawn to it, turning sluggishly and shuffling toward the sound. Seizing the opportunity, I dashed to the factory wall. I pulled out a rope from my backpack, one end tied to a climbing pick. I swung it hard. The pick lodged firmly in the windowsill. I took a deep breath and nimbly climbed the rope, swiftly pulling myself through the window and rolling inside the factory. It was a massive production floor, filled with rusted machinery and scattered parts. Only thin beams of moonlight filtered through the damaged roof. At the other end of the workshop, came muffled sobs and arguing. I cautiously followed the sounds. In a corner enclosed by discarded machinery, I saw dozens of survivors, mostly elderly and children. I immediately spotted my parents among them. They were huddled in the corner. My mother sat hugging her knees, crying silently, while my father held her tight, comforting her. My eyes instantly welled up. I choked out a cry. Everyone jumped at the sound of my voice, all heads turning toward me. My parents' heads snapped up. The moment they saw me, their faces shifted from shock to pure joy. My mother cried out and came scrambling toward me. Our family of 3, in this desperate apocalypse, embraced tightly. The joy of reunion washed away all fear and worry. But soon, a harsh voice cut in, shattering the tender moment. "Hey, where'd you come from?" A scar-faced man stepped forward, backed by several burly young men. Clearly the leader here. He eyed the bulging backpack on my shoulders, his gaze greedy. "You've got guts, kid, making it all the way here alone. What is in that backpack? Open it up, let's see." I stepped in front of my parents, staring coldly at him. "This is mine." "Yours?" Scar sneered. "Around here, nothing belongs to anyone. Everything belongs to me. Hand over the bag if you know what is good for you, or else. He hefted his machete. The threat was clear. His thugs closed in behind him, eyeing me like predators. The elderly and weak, driven here by them, seethed with silent rage, but could only watch with pity. Seeing this, my father pulled me behind him and forced a smile at Scar. "Boss, my son doesn't know any better. There is just some food in his bag. Take it all, just don't hurt him." "Too late," Scar sneered. "I want more than his bag now. I want his life." The moment he finished speaking, Scar lunged at me. A cold glint flashed in my eyes. Instead of retreating, I stepped forward. My steel pipe swung at a sharp angle and slammed hard into his wrist. A sharp crack rang out. Scar's wrist bent at a sickening angle. Everyone froze. No one had expected this scrawny-looking kid to actually fight back. Scar was sweating bullets from the pain. His face twisted as he roared, "You hit me? Get him, grab him. I'll make him wish he was dead." The thugs snapped out of it. They charged at me, yelling. I tossed my backpack to my parents, then raised my pipe to defend. One thug swung a wooden club at me. I dodged aside and flicked my wrist. The other end of my pipe caught him right in the groin. He screamed instantly, doubled over, and collapsed. No wasted motion. Every strike hit a vulnerable joint, just enough to protect myself. What terrified them more was, my stamina seemed endless. After taking down 2 of them, the remaining thugs were terrified, too scared to step forward. Scarface clutched his broken wrist, staring at me in shock and fury. "Who the hell are you? You're an ability user too." I didn't answer him. I just fixed him with an icy stare. All the suffering I'd endured these past months of the apocalypse, at this moment, blazed into pure rage. Leave or die. My ruthlessness stunned them all. Scarface's expression flickered. He hadn't expected to pick a fight with someone this dangerous. But while the standoff continued, suddenly, the factory's iron gate erupted with a deafening crash, followed by a second, then a third. At this, the crowd erupted in panic. The zombies outside were battering the gate. What is going on? Why are the zombies suddenly rampaging? Panic spread like wildfire. Scarface had no time for that. Together with several thugs, used their bodies and debris to desperately brace the buckling gate. But there were too many zombies. The gate was badly dented from the impacts, the latch groaning under the strain, on the verge of collapse. Despair gripped everyone. My parents shook with terror, gripping my hand tightly. I glanced over. It was an old, rusted iron gate. A bold idea formed in my mind. Then, gripping the steel pipe, under everyone's shocked stares, I headed for the gate. "What are you doing? You'll get yourself killed." One of the thugs bracing the door yelled at me. I ignored him and pressed my palm directly against the cold, corroded metal. Then, as everyone watched in disbelief, a miracle occurred. That dented, battered iron gate, as though time itself reversed, gradually smoothed out, even the warped frame straightening. In mere seconds, a gleaming, steel door stood before them. Against the zombies' assault, the door held firm, emitting only dull thuds. The entire workshop fell deathly silent. Everyone stared at me dumbfounded. Scarface's mouth hung open, forgetting his broken wrist entirely. He pointed at me, stammering, Your power is repair." I couldn't be bothered to explain. I withdrew my hand and looked at him coldly. Strength is the only currency that matters in the apocalypse. My ruthlessness just now, combined with this miraculous display, had completely shattered Scarface's resolve. He looked at me, and his eyes held no more greed, only deep, gut-wrenching fear. Big brother, I had no idea who I was dealing with. A man of your stature. Please don't hold this against me. I didn't say a word. I just walked over to my parents. My mother looked at me, her eyes conflicted, proud, worried, and almost like she didn't quite recognize me. I took her hand and gave her a reassuring look. "Mom, don't worry, I've got you." Then, from that massive backpack, I pulled out a self-heating rice meal, a sausage, and a bottle of water. I handed them over. "Mom, Dad eats something first." The smell of food instantly grabbed everyone's attention. Those survivors, starving for God knows how long, stared at the food in my parents' hands, with loud gulps, their eyes filled with desperate hunger. Scarface and his crew couldn't take their eyes off it. In an apocalypse where food was worth more than gold, my casual abundance stunned them even more than fixing the gate. When I was done, I turned back to Scarface. From now on, I'm running this place. My voice wasn't loud, but everyone heard it clear as day. Scarface's face twitched. Finally, he hung his head in defeat. Taking over the factory stronghold went smoother than I expected. Against overwhelming power and endless supplies, Scarface's little authority fell apart instantly. I didn't kick them out. In the apocalypse, people are a resource too. I put them on guard duty and zombie cleanup. I'd handle food and logistics. Every day, I'd lock myself in a private room, pretending to check inventory, while actually cranking out food as fast as I could. Once daily necessities were covered, crate after crate of fresh supplies appeared before everyone. By then, every look they gave me was pure awe. They all thought I had a spatial ability, storing massive amounts of supplies inside. With plenty of food and safe shelter, the survivors slowly came back to life. Under my management, the entire abandoned factory became well organized. Mom and Dad became my right-hand team, helping me manage people and hand out supplies. They regained their dignity and pride among the others. Their spirits lifted more each day. Everything was looking up. Yet one thing still weighed on me. That was Blue Bay community. That property manager, Bao, kicked out defenseless elderly people like my parents, leaving them to fend for themselves. I'd settle that score with him eventually. Besides, Blue Bay's defenses and living conditions were way better than this rundown factory. I wanted to give my parents, and everyone who'd stuck with me, a real home. Rare find in the apocalypse. Right in front of Shen Ling, I refreshed a Tang blade dulled from combat, then refreshed a box of antibiotics about to expire, turning them into brand new meds. Shen Ling watched all this, and finally got it. My ability wasn't spatial storage, and it wasn't repair. It was something she couldn't comprehend, almost like a law of nature. A power so deep it touched the fundamental laws themselves. She stayed quiet for a long time, then finally bowed to me. Blade Squad, from today, we follow your orders. With the Blade Squad on my side, I truly controlled Blue Bay residences. I set new rules. Everyone, Howard or not, got food if they worked. With my endless supplies, I quickly won them over. At the same time, I'd cleared out all the troublemakers in the community. Under my management, Blue Bay had been completely transformed, thriving and vibrant. My parents looked at me with pride and satisfaction in their eyes. They never asked what my ability actually was. They only knew their son had grown up, and that he'd become someone everyone could rely on. Once the base was running smoothly, I started thinking about something deeper. What exactly were the limits of my ability? I'd refreshed instant noodles. I'd refreshed entire buildings. So could I refresh a living person? I found a guard who'd been scratched by a zombie in combat, someone who had already begun to turn. Everyone thought he was beyond saving. I sent everyone away. I closed the door and placed my hand on his forehead. A soft white light enveloped the guard. His agonized screams gradually subsided. The mutations in his body visibly receded. I watched his wound vanish and felt a tidal wave rise in my chest. I'd done it. I'd restored his body to its original state before infection. This meant the zombie virus was no longer a death sentence. This discovery thrilled me even more than refreshing an entire building. If I could cure the zombie virus, didn't that mean I could save more people? Maybe even end to this apocalypse. A grand plan quietly took shape in my mind. But before that, I had some personal business to settle. I called Shen Ling in and asked if there'd been any news of a survivor group called Lihuo, the one with Chen Yan, that D-rank flame manipulator, and my ex, Lu Ruyan. Shen Ling pulled up the map and pointed to a large supermarket in the East District. According to our intel, they'd occupied that location. They're the largest faction in the East. Their leader's name is Chen Yan, a peak D-rank flame manipulator. A cold glint flashed in my eyes. Let's go pay our neighbor a visit tomorrow. The next day, I only brought Shen Ling and the Blade Squad. We drove in an armored off-roader I'd upgraded and plowed straight through to that big supermarket. The place had been turned into a solid fortress. Armed guards lined the walls. Our arrival immediately put them on edge. State your name. Shen Ling leaned out and shouted. Lin Fan from Lan Bay Base. Here to see Chen Yan, leader of Blaze Base. The men on the wall clearly hadn't heard of me, but they knew Lan Bay Base. Before long, the supermarket's main gate swung open. A man in a red leather jacket stepped out. Behind him was Lu Ruyan, all smiles and flattery. It had been months. Lu Ruyan seemed to be doing pretty well for herself. She froze when she saw me. Then her face twisted with open contempt and smug superiority. Well, if it isn't Lin Fan, couldn't hack it out there. Come crawling to Blaze for help. She probably still thought I was that pathetic loser who needed her protection. Chen Yan looked me up and down too, especially when he spotted Shen Ling behind me. And the Blade Squad. A flicker of wariness crossed his eyes, but mostly he looked unimpressed. Lan Bay Base. Never heard of it. We don't take in freeloaders. Since we're all survivors here, leave your wheels and supplies and beat it. He was talking big. In his mind, his low-level fire powers made him untouchable. Lu Ruyan piled on, riding his coattails. You hear that, Lin Fan? For old time's sake, I'm telling you, don't get cocky. The way you are now, you're not fit to shine Chen Yan's shoes. I smiled and shook my head. No, we're not dying. I turned to face her. And everyone in this city, this apocalypse, ends now. I walked out of Hope City alone, stood atop the city wall, facing that tide of zombies that seemed ready to swallow heaven and earth. Inside the city, 100,000 citizens watched me on giant screens. They were nervous, scared, but most of all, they trusted. The S-Class zombies' roar seemed to tear at their very souls. It commanded the horde to launch the final assault. Slowly, I raised my hands, as if to embrace the whole world. Everyone assumed I was about to unleash some world-shattering attack, but they were wrong. There was no killing intent on my face, only a trace of mercy. My power was never meant for destruction, it was meant for rebirth. I closed my eyes and released everything I had, holding nothing back. Not targeting one zombie, not targeting one area, but targeting this scarred, broken, dying world. Time seemed to freeze. A light beyond words, gentle yet endless white light, burst from me, spreading outward across the world. Wherever the light touched, the frenzied zombies stopped in their tracks. Their rotting flesh began to heal. Their clouded eyes cleared. The violence and bloodlust in their eyes gave way to confusion and humanity. The light swept across the land. Green grass sprouted from the cracked, parched earth. The gray haze lifted, revealing the clear blue sky they hadn't seen in ages. The S-Class zombie, seated on the throne of bones, watched in horror as its body transformed. It tried to resist, but could not stop it. This primordial force from the origin of the world. Eventually, it too regained human form, staring blankly at its own hands. The entire world had been refreshed. Everyone infected by the virus returned to normal. Every environment destroyed by the apocalypse came back to life, as if that 5-year nightmare had been nothing but an illusion. Inside Hope City, a deathly silence fell. Everyone watched through their screens, stunned by this miraculous sight. No one knew how much time had passed. The first person wept with joy, followed by a second, then a third, until thunderous cheers shook the entire city, echoing across the entire renewed world. They shouted my name. I stood atop the city wall, feeling the gentle breeze. I turned and saw Shen Ling. I saw my parents. I saw countless joyful faces filled with hope. I smiled. The instant noodles before me could refresh infinitely, and so could the world beneath my feet.